The word trope is thrown around a lot, especially when it comes to books and TV. I'm a big critic of tropes, in particular, the less creative ones, and I'm more than just a little vocal about it when I discover a show with potential that ends up being ruined by lazy writing and the embrace of tropes. I can bring up countless examples, though let's just say that anime, for example, is a medium full of tropes that are not only lazy, but actively problematic or even damaging to the creativity within the industry as a whole. But I'll hold that thought for another time. While I mostly hear the word used in the context of TV, movies, or books, tropes aren't exclusive to any of those mediums. Outside of other video essays, I don't think I can confidently say that I've ever heard the word used when it comes to video games. And, to be honest, I'm not surprised that I haven't. Video games are so varied that it's hard to pinpoint any one thing that can be considered a trope. Even then, what is a trope for games if not a genre? If a game has guns and is PvP like Valorant or Counter-Strike, is that a trope? A trope is a narrative tool that acts as a recognizable pattern across several unrelated stories. A favorite trope of mine, for example, is the unreliable narrator, where the validity of information fed to the reader or viewer is questionable at best, since that information is biased towards the tendencies and personality of the narrator. You may have seen this in films like American Psycho, books like Catcher in the Rye, or anime like Bakemonogatari. These are just examples off the top of my head, but you get the idea. The reason I like unreliable narrators so much is because everybody is an unreliable narrator. When reading a historical account, or even listening to a drunk friend recount the events of last night's party, you use your judgment when deciding whether to take that information at face value or with a grain of salt. With all this in mind, I think that it would be unfair or even disingenuous to call most gameplay mechanics tropes, as not all gameplay is narrative. Sometimes, games don't really need a narrative to be fun. While most PvP games have some form of story to them, it's rarely the main appeal by any margin. And many earlier games, like Minesweeper and Tetris, both popular games to this day, are simple and fun, no story needed. But the idea that gameplay mechanics can't be tropes is also not quite right. It's not a stretch to say that gameplay does inherently frame a game's narrative. An action game might not sell the intensity of a situation without thrilling, high-speed hack-and-slash gameplay. An RPG might not provide the same feeling of role-playing flexibility and freedom without having enough options and dialogue and a wide enough range of viable approaches to the game. And a horror game may not feel as scary without the jump scares or the risk of death. Right? October 27th, 2022 marks the release date of a game that's very near and dear to me. Signalis. I only became aware of its existence in early 2023 and got around to playing it in the middle of that year, but it quickly became one of the best games I've ever played. Signalis is a Silent Hill-inspired horror game made by the German indie studio Rose Engine. and it had me gripped in gameplay, music, and story from the very beginning. Something about the eerie atmosphere and lonely vibe of this game was exactly what I wanted in a horror game. And I'd never really liked any horror games before it. It just clicked for me in a unique way. I didn't die during Signalis. At least, not for the first 8 hours of the 10 it took to beat. And very specifically, not dying was thrilling. While I didn't die, the game did a fantastic job of keeping me on the brink of death at all times. I was always low on ammunition, where every bullet, mistake, and moment of panic counted, so I pre-planned my trips through the map to avoid as many encounters with enemies as possible, and my limited supplies were only ever used when I absolutely needed to use them. I go into great detail about all of this because the instant I did end up dying was the instant the illusion shattered. Elster keels over, and the screen relics, leading to a blue screen that reads Fatal Error, and a return to the title screen. From there, continuing the game returns you to the most recent time you saved, hopefully not too long ago. The instant I was reminded that Elster dying has no real impact beyond a time-related setback, all that pressure, the stress, that fear of loss, deflated in a matter of seconds. At first, I figured it wasn't a big deal, since I could take a moment to breathe and stretch, walk around, and return to the game. But that same feeling of stress and investment never quite returned after that. Don't get me wrong, I still love the game to bits, and it still stands out as one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had. It just lost a little bit of that spark. It got me thinking, though, maybe the game would have been better if you couldn't die. I don't believe that, not really. The understanding that it's possible to fail is what makes it so thrilling to teeter on that edge, barely alive, but not dead yet for so long. I just can't help but wonder if there's a better way. If maybe death as a form of punishment, or consequence for the player's failures, has become an overused trope in video games. An event that punishes you by wasting your time, rather than really sinking its virtual teeth in. But if not death, what else can raise the stakes? How else can failure be punished in a video game? One answer to this question comes in the form of another game that stuck with me over the years. A game with its fair share of flaws and scuff and jank, but one that embraces them and results in a wholly unique identity. Another indie title, this time by Nine Dots Studio, by the name of Outward. Both different from any other game I've played and a satisfying challenge, Outward has you play as an adventurer in a hostile yet gorgeous world, as you track stats like hunger and thirst, temperature and health, and debt. I'm not even joking on that last one. You do start the game in serious debt and are kicked out of your home if you can't pay it off fast enough. 10 out of 10 game. Despite all of these survival mechanics, the game never kills you. The only way to have a true death in the game is by playing hardcore mode, where running out of health has a 1 in 5 chance of ending your character's story. In Outward, when your health hits 0, the player character ragdolls with a fade to black. Sounds like your average game, right? Except when the dust settles and the game finishes loading, rather than finding yourself back at the main menu or back at your previous save, Outward has a variety of defeat scenarios, situations or complications that arise in order to either push you forward or set you back. You might have narrowly evaded death and escaped the fight, falling unconscious in some nearby safe place for hours or even days. Maybe you were found unconscious by a fellow traveler and returned to the nearest city or campfire. Or maybe the bandits that defeated you have you captured and put to work in their mines. You live, but are often seriously injured or sick, or missing money or equipment. Did I mention the game autosaves? The show goes on, and you live to suffer through the consequences of your actions rather than wiping the slate to retry. The system isn't perfect, but this fail-forward process often has me excited to lose, to see what new experience is ahead of me and what new challenge I have to face, rather than being punished with repetition. God forbid you forgot to save for the last hour in Skyrim. At the absolute minimum, it makes the setback of dying just a little bit more interesting. It's systems like this that make me mourn the overuse of death in games. There's such a trove of untapped potential, of missed opportunities within the game-making scene, because a failure is accepted to be the end of the road. I feel it would be a bit disingenuous of me to throw out any more examples without acknowledging that there are plenty of video games that don't involve any sort of death mechanic. Plenty of calmer games, like Stardew Valley or Blue Prince, don't feel the need to include any method of dying. In fact, the former has a similar yet simpler system to that of Outward. Falling to 0 health or exhaustion in the mines leads you to being saved and safely returned home, for a price. Similarly, many puzzle games like Antechamber, The Witness, and Eyes of Ara also have no way for the player character to die, opting instead for the consequence to mistakes simply being the time you spend solving the puzzles. But even within the puzzle game genre, games like the Talos Principle do have ways you can die, resetting your progress. I don't mean to discredit the Talos Principle. It's an incredibly thought-provoking game, and if any game gets to kill the player character, it would be the one that explores concepts like mortality and consciousness. It does, however, help prove that death is a rather pervasive element in almost every game genre. But within the scope of games that allow the player character to die, a subgenre of games stands out. Those who acknowledge the act and process of having died. Those games like Deathloop, or Dead Cells, or Loop Hero, or even the Dark Souls trilogy to a lesser degree, where dying is a core plot element and actively helps progress the story. My favorite of these games, and the example I'd like to talk about here, is Outward. Outer Worlds. Outer Wilds. As an exploration game, I couldn't really re-record my first experience playing Outer Wilds, so the gameplay shown is from the stream of a friend of mine, Gally. So please, show her some support. Her link is in the description. And on screen. Outer Wilds is a game that really blew my mind, and raised the bar for space exploration, or even general exploration games as a whole. In Outer Wilds, You play as a Hearthian, an alien astronaut setting off in a rickety spaceship in order to explore the solar system you live in. You visit planets that are collapsing into black holes, ocean planets surrounded entirely by tornadoes that fling you into orbit, and so much more, piecing together the story of what happened to the ancient species that traveled through your solar system countless centuries ago. In the truest sense, Outer Wilds is an open-world game. Every door is open to you from the moment you open your eyes for the first time in the game. The only limiting factor is information. It feels like an immense, complex puzzle that you get the opportunity to put together over many 22-minute intervals, each of which ends when the sun explodes. Unlike many more tedious processes of repetition in games, where reloading would require you to replay everything up until the point where you died, Outer Wilds' fully open world allows you to explore one planet, die, and take that information with you as you go to the opposite side of the solar system for the next run. You never have to hit your head on a wall until you break past that barrier. Instead, you get to hit the ground running in some other direction with just as much purpose as you started with, if not more. To be clear, Outer Wilds definitely doesn't reject or diverge from the trope of dying. Instead, it embraces the idea, fully acknowledging the fact that it happened in the first place. The game is fully conscious of the frustrations and pitfalls that dying might result in, and finds a way to work around them, even making it an important key mechanic to be able to die, since some locations are only accessible in one direction, a unique element only available to Outer Wilds because of how strict its time frame is. In both acknowledging and working with the process of dying, the game's method of maintaining momentum and excitement in exploration is again not too dissimilar to the fail-forward process I described for Outward. Now, I'm not advocating for all games to stop killing the player character, or to try and explain how the story continues despite said death. Tropes can be good, when used with serious intent behind them. Dying in a video game has a time and place. Many PvP games are built around the necessity of removing players from a round, whether temporarily or permanently, in order for one side to gain an advantage or win. Sometimes, in notably challenging games like in the case of Souls-likes, dying is a result of the challenging gameplay. A trade-off is made, sacrificing some immersion for difficulty in an attempt to meet in the middle. And, of course, there are plenty of moments in gaming where dying can be funnier than it is frustrating.
What? No, 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 please, please, please! Let me back on the planet, please! Oh my god!
And I don't want to dismiss the simple truth that dying in a game is way easier to program than any of the alternatives I've pointed out. So, why am I saying all this if I'm just going to acknowledge that there's a time and place for death in a video game? Well, like every tool, I think tropes need to be used carefully and appropriately, with their use, or even lack thereof, being a conscious decision rather than accepted as the default or standard. When making a game, I believe the question should be posed, how does letting the player die benefit the experience? What would a puzzle game like Antechamber, or a calm game like Stardew Valley, or even a sillier game like Donut County gain from adding the risk of death? I can't help but wonder if, more often than you'd expect, the answer would be nothing. Hey, if you got this far, thank you so much for watching. This is my first real attempt at making a video. It took me way too long to get around to finally making this, but I'm really glad I did. The whole process has been a blast. I can't promise any sort of consistency in uploads, but if you're interested in seeing more, let me know, and I'll be happy to oblige. To be honest, though, I'll probably make more regardless of if people want to hear me yap or not, so I guess I'll see you next time. Peace.